Welcome back, everyone. After over 100,000 miles of road trips, overlanding, and off-road abuse, we're going to be showcasing our 2021 2.5-liter Crosstrek Sport and letting you know everything that we've learned about this vehicle in that time, as well as everything that you need to know if you're looking at buying one or looking at off-roading one. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so to make this video as easy to navigate as possible and to create the most value for you guys, I'm going to start off with what are all the benefits and what are our favorite things about this vehicle. What are the best features, where has it performed really well, that sort of stuff. Moving on from that, I'm going to get into what are the changes that we've made, what are the changes we haven't made, and what are the changes that I wish that we would have made. This will give you guys a lot of ideas if you guys are looking to modify these vehicles for overlanding or specific tasks. We've done a bunch of different variations on this vehicle and we've kind of dialed in what we like about it. So we're going to talk about those changes as well as some of the considerations that you need to think about if you're going to be modifying a Crosstrek. After that, we're going to get into what are the biggest cons and downsides of the Crosstrek platform. What issues have we had and what shortfalls have we seen with this vehicle over the last 100,000 miles? Then lastly, to round everything off and to give you guys that really concise data that you need to make informed decisions, we're going to talk about the service record of this vehicle specifically and what sort of maintenance costs that you should expect over 100,000 miles with a Subaru Crosstrek. Okay, so starting off with the biggest benefits and our favorite features about this vehicle, road quality and driving quality is one that you're going to notice right away. I've driven a lot of vehicles, a lot of Subarus, and the Crosstrek just drives amazing. The feel of the body roll and stuff is super manageable, and you can corner exceptionally well on highways and stuff. And the get up and go with the 2.5 liter is honestly pretty impressive. It's no sports car, but you can get going when you need to, and man, I drive aggressively and I love this thing. Additionally, you have extremely good traction control. Now this one should go without saying because it's a Subaru, but I spend a lot of time road tripping in the winter to travel and shoot at different ski resorts, and I've driven on just some of the gnarliest, worst roads that you've ever seen, and this vehicle performs beautifully. It is like, I don't even know how to say this, but it's like harder to get it to lose traction than to maintain traction, which means when we're doing like drifting shots and fun stuff off-roading, even with traction control turned off, this thing refuses to let go of the road. And so traction while driving on snow, ice, gravel, off-roading, even doing a little bit of like smooth rock crawling in Moab is just unbelievably good. Let's talk about reliability. Reliability on this vehicle has been shockingly good. I am not nice on vehicles. I have a tendency to ignore oil changes because the numbers are just wrong with synthetic oil, but unbelievably reliable. Now I've done a lot of damage to this vehicle, and even when I punched a hole through like the transmission and stuff, it just kept chugging along just fine, didn't even notice. These vehicles will go through pretty much anything, and the few issues that I have had with it have been entirely self-inflicted. Additionally, with the plethora of safety features implemented in the modern Crosstreks, you're just going to know that you're incredibly safe on the road. They have everything from lane control to lane assist and even like braking assist, as well as my favorite, hill descent for when you're on exceptionally icy or difficult to maintain roads. All of these things come together in a very complete package that provides you with a very reliable and safe ecosystem. And when you're doing this many miles on a vehicle, that safety comes in handy time and time again because you're just eventually going to end up in incidents where having one extra safety feature means the difference between having a really bad day or getting out of it just fine. Lastly, the one thing that I kind of have mixed feelings about when it comes to the pros and cons is going to be the gas mileage. If you're driving this car stock and you're not putting too much on or in it, the gas mileage is a huge benefit. Getting 30 or more miles per gallon on this vehicle is excellent for saving money along the way and is definitely a major benefit. Also, I wasn't going to throw this one in here because it's definitely going to be the most controversial and I'm probably going to get some hate from mechanics, but I personally love the CVT in this vehicle. It's definitely the thing that most people are concerned about because the earlier generations of CVTs in Subarus had major issues, and I've talked to people with Outbacks from even like 5 years ago who are already having to do transmission replacements at only like 60,000 miles. But the driving quality and feel with the CVT is an absolute pleasure. It is so smooth, so responsive, and so crisp that I love it. I've had transmission issues because I broke my transmission by putting a rock through it, but I haven't had any reliability issues from just normal wear and tear. And so I love the CVT. I think it's a huge benefit. And with the reliability that they've achieved on the newer ones, I don't think you're going to have the concerns that you might when you're looking at like old Reddit posts. So just remember that they've come a long way with those. And I think personally that it's a huge benefit to have in the vehicle. Okay, moving into modifications, in case you haven't noticed yet, I don't have a bumper. All right, now in my personal opinion, this is by far the most necessary modification on a Subaru. In the first 70,000 miles with this vehicle, I knocked off the bumper no fewer than maybe 12 times. And the reason for that is because the way that the Subaru engine sits, it sits low, flat, and in front of the front axle. And that gives it really, really good handling performance and really good balance. It's actually what gives the Subarus their very low center of gravity and allows them to drive so well on snow and ice. But because of that, you have an absolutely terrible approach angle. And if you're doing even small amounts of off-roading with this vehicle, you're very quickly going to either cave in the plastic front bumper on this or just completely knock it off. We had knocked mine off within a week of getting the vehicle, and that only continued to be a pattern during our time with it. And unfortunately, all of the plastic infrastructure that holds that plastic front bumper in place is super fragile, but super expensive to replace. So after enough time and damaging the bumper enough, we eventually gave in and just cut it. Now, this is a custom welded front bumper that's designed to take impacts and also be modular enough that I can replace the parts when it gets pretty damaged. It's been a huge learning curve to kind of figure out how this thing is going to work well with the vehicle and with its safety features. But the approach angle is a huge issue. Now, you might notice that we aren't actually lifted. So a lot of people lift these cars right off the bat, and my philosophy going into the Crosstrek platform was that I was only going to make the modifications as I needed them. So I didn't cut the bumper until the last possible minute, and to this day, I still haven't felt the need to lift the Crosstrek. I see major downsides to the wear and tear put onto the axles and the joints in your suspension, and I haven't run into many, if any, roads that I can't just find a solution through without a lift. And so for that reason, I think a lift is kind of a personal preference. If you really like the look of it, you have the money, go for it. But to be honest, if you know your geometry and you have experience off-roading, you're not really going to need to lift it. The improvement that you get on your approach and breakover angle is barely 1 or 2 degrees, and that's just not enough for me to justify taking 10, 20,000 miles off of my CV axles and all of my suspension. However, you might notice I do have pretty beefy all-terrains on here. Now, this is one that I feel like a lot of people get wrong with the Crosstreks, and I'm going to try to talk about, but I'm no expert in this. So I have Wild Peak AT3Ws on as opposed to the more popular KO2s. And the reason that I'm going with these ones is because these are a much, much lighter tire than the KO2s. The KO2s don't come in a size that's compatible with the Crosstrek that doesn't have extra steel ply within it. And that makes the KO2s exceptionally heavy when compared to the AT3Ws that I have on. The other tire that I would highly recommend is the AT Trails from the Wild Peak AT3 Trails. It's a even lighter weight version of this tire, so if you're doing more highway travel, it makes a lot more sense. The reason that I'm so concerned with the weight of my tires is because with the all-wheel drive system on this vehicle, it's very carefully calibrated for the weight and torque required to accelerate and move this vehicle. If you add a ton of weight at the end of each of your tires, at the end of each of your axles, you're going to be wearing out the all-wheel drive system, and it actually becomes imbalanced very quickly. And this is something that we did a lot of research into and talked to a lot of different mechanics who modify and work on and play with Subarus before we ever committed to, because we didn't want to destroy the vehicle just for a beefier looking tire. The other one that I really wanted to mention is that we had to replace the OEM crossbars really early on. So the car came with the stock OEM Subaru aero bars, but they're only rated for like 100 to like maybe 140 pounds rolling weight. So we very quickly had to scrap them and put on these Thule square bars. So if you're buying new, I would consider leaving that out because the OEM crossbars from Subaru just aren't up to putting on like a roof box or a rooftop tent with a lot of extra weight up there. Speaking of the rooftop tent, I'm not really going to cover that too much in this video, but if you're interested in our thoughts on them, we've actually used a ton of different rooftop tents during our time with the Subaru, and I made an entire separate video talking about that, everything from miles per gallon numbers to the additional wear and tear and all of that. So if you want to see that, go check out that video, and I'll put the link in the description. Alright guys, now there's a ton of other different add-ons and features that you can put on this car, but I really think that you need to think about how it's going to impact the vehicle overall. There's everything from suspension spacers to different coils to full body plating, underbody plating, which personally I would recommend after my experience punching holes in it. But just remember that everything that you do to this vehicle is going to slowly chip away at your reliability and miles per gallon. And so if you're picking features purely for the aesthetic, as opposed to the utility, you need to weigh that cost versus benefit to yourself. And these vehicles are very, very carefully tuned to get the mile per gallon, the efficiency that they do. They're very streamlined, they're very light, they're very compact, and adding on all this extra weight and stuff is just gonna very, very slowly chip away at the functionality and the reliability of that vehicle. So it's a personal decision all the way through. We've done a ton of off-roading. Like, I cannot express to you how many times this car has pulled people out or been north of 100 miles deep into the backcountry, and these very, very minimal modifications have worked really, really well for us, and we've had no issues getting in and out of locations, going off-roading, getting unstuck, mudding. We've crossed rivers in this thing, and it's doing just fine. So if we can do all of this with it basically stock, then maybe think about how much of a benefit you're really getting versus how much of a cost with each modification you add to it. Okay, so moving through the cons, the biggest drawbacks, and the biggest downsides that we've seen to this vehicle, I'm going to move through them pretty quickly, and if you have any specific questions about them, feel free to leave those down in the comments below. The first major one is the mile per gallon drop-off that you see when adding anything to this vehicle. As I touched upon in modifications, you got to remember it's very, very finely balanced. So just adding the rooftop tent and extra weight, and even just small things like that very quickly drop you from the supposed 32 miles per gallon all the way down to like 18 or 20 miles per gallon, and that's just not great. Outside of that, I think I've touched upon it already, but the really flimsy bumpers are just really, really a bummer. I see it all the time on the road where people have caved them in, but the entire thing from the wheels forward is essentially just plastic. And if you breathe on it too hard, it will fall apart. And even if you're just driving this car to work every single day, the rocks hitting the plastic will actually like punch holes and major chips into your bumper. Outside of that, there's just a couple other parts of this vehicle that are just too flimsy for my taste. The payload capacity is a major downside to me, because when we load this when we load this vehicle up to go on trips and stuff, you can noticeably see the sag. And honestly, that would be one of my biggest justifications for lifting it, would be to put in overload suspension on the back, because the whole back is just sagging once you put in weight or anything into the back. Okay, and lastly, this one is super, super specific and small, but you're gonna hear it from pretty much every Crosstrek owner. These windshields suck, all right? This is my second one, but it's fully like split in half already. If you get hit by any rock, and I mean any rock, it will split. It is the flimsiest piece of glass I have ever seen, and the cost to replace this is like 10 times more than any other car because of the eyesight calibration. So you're gonna end up forking over a ton of money on windshields unless you're comfortable just driving with cracked ones. And I've heard this from every single modern Crosstrek owner that I know, that their windshield is just way, way, way too flimsy. And I really don't understand why that is, because at the angle it is, you really shouldn't have that many issues with it. And then, so lastly, I'm going to put this up on screen in just a second, but this is the complete normal service record for the vehicle. There's not really much to show or talk about, but I wanted to be able to include real world numbers, very specific prices, incidents, because that way it has like actual grounded real world numbers that you guys can compare to, as opposed to just somebody talking. And if you're making a decision about this vehicle based on its reliability or how much it's going to cost you in the long run, well, now you have somebody's actual real numbers to compare and make estimates off of. There is some stuff that I left out of here, but everything that I left out is incidents that are very specific to me. For example, at one point I had to have the hood replaced because we hit a deer early on, and that's not something I would expect to happen to you, so it's not something I included. At one point, as I mentioned, I punched a hole in the transmission. That was very, very absurd. It was like a 1 in a million event, and well, I didn't include that in here because we wouldn't expect it to happen to you. On the right side, you can see I made a note about oil changes. The one thing I really want to say about this is that the sticker that oil change places and dealerships put on the car will suggest that you should get your oil changed every like 4,000 miles. But if you look up how long synthetic oil lasts, it's supposed to last between 7,000 and 15,000. And I was finding it to regularly last over 10,000 miles when being checked regularly. So you're better off checking it regularly, making sure that the oil is clean and that you have plenty of it than following those stickers. They put those shorter time periods on the stickers because the more that you come in, the more money they make. So if you do the work for yourself, check it yourself, you'll save money even if you're not doing the oil change yourself. Yeah, but that's pretty much everything. You can see that in 100,000 miles, we've really only been into a dealership 3 times, and it doesn't really add up for a lot considering how many miles we've put on the vehicle. You will see a note at the top here that we had the windshield replaced. It was about $1,000 before insurance, and then I had to pay about $300. And at the bottom, you can see another note that I'm currently overdue for another windshield. I've had one cracked for maybe 20,000 miles now, and I've just been leaving it because it cracks kind of out of the way, and as soon as I put on a new one, it will crack again. So like I said, the windshield is a big pain point, but outside of that, the vehicle is super reliable, it's in great condition, and there's just really not much that you have to do. The thing runs perfectly, it's not showing its age at all, and they're just really, really, really efficient and reliable vehicles. Alright guys, and so with that, after 100,000 miles with this vehicle, I think my biggest takeaway is that it is just an incredibly versatile and well-rounded vehicle. It is by far one of my favorite daily drivers with incredible traction control, incredible handling, and just an absolute pleasure to drive, whether it's on dirt roads, highways, or rock crawling. I think it's important to remember that with that kind of well-rounded nature of this vehicle, you lose some of the specialization that you might get from a more dedicated off-road vehicle. Now, for most people, I think that balance is exactly what you're looking for. I think this is the perfect vehicle for most people, because most people aren't spending the majority of their time off-roading. And even myself, as somebody who works in the backcountry, I never once felt that this vehicle was holding me back in any significant way. We traveled with everything from Jeeps to Broncos to Xterras, and oftentimes they struggled far more with traction in deep snow or mud than this guy did. And so at the end of the day, I think what's most important is that you guys make an educated decision that's right for you. And so I'm really hoping that today I was able to provide all of the information that you might need to know, as well as any specific details or answered specific questions that you guys were looking for. However, if there's something that I didn't cover or something that you guys still have questions about, feel free to drop it in the comments below and I'll make sure to respond to every single one. Right now I have a huge goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so I'm trying to do at least 2 videos a month. And if you guys have any recommendations about stuff you guys want to see, questions that you guys have, I will jump on it immediately, either in the comments or by making an entire video about it. So with that guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.